Hey third grade, it's time for your art lesson with your friendly neighborhood art teacher. You guys are going to be working on a part of your expedition, or touching on your expedition today. Your expedition was exploring Neverland. This is when you were talking about how can lessons learned from fictional texts transform society. You studied Peter Pan, and in my class you guys were working on making your Neverland maps. Today we're going to start working on settings. Your expedition guiding questions are: how do writers capture a reader's imagination? How can I create a solution to a problem that a library character might encounter? How can the lessons learned from fictional texts transform society? And your learning targets for today are: I can tell what background, middle ground, and foreground mean, and I can illustrate the difference between a background, middle ground, and foreground. Before we begin, you're going to need paper, pencil, and eraser, and coloring supplies. You'll also need a ruler, which I forgot to write down. It doesn't matter if you use lined paper or copy paper, and it doesn't matter if you use crayons, color pencils, or markers. Remember, you're going to be drawing big. You're going to be taking up the whole page. So this is my example of what you will finish, but this is not everything you're going to be doing today. You're going to be working with your paper sideways. Not tall, but you do want to do it sideways. You'll want either a ruler or something that you can use to make your lines straight. If you need to use the edge of a book, that also works. You start by making 3 lines. One at the top. Then we're going to do one right about the middle. And then one more, not right next to the ground. You don't want to be really close. It can be kind of close to that middle one. And across. Those are these 3 lines. On the top one, we're going to write a word, if my light will let me. That's kind of big. I'm going to be writing background. It's going to be smaller than the word we write here. This word is going to be a little bit bigger. And it's going to be middle ground. And then underneath this line, you're going to write the biggest word. It's not the longest word, but it is the biggest word, because things in the background are small, things in the foreground are big, and things in the middle ground are middle. We're going to add a tree in the background. It's going to be a small tree. It doesn't overlap anything because there's nothing behind it. In the middle ground, I'm going to draw a tree, and it can overlap the background line, but it doesn't have to. But the foreground tree needs to be big, and it is going to overlap the other 2 lines. So what do we do about this? We're going to erase this line, and then we're going to erase the second line, and then we're going to erase that last line. Now this tree is overlapping all of the other lines, which makes it the biggest and it shows us that it's in front. The last thing we're going to work on is making a road come from the background all the way up to the foreground. We're going to pretend that this is on like a bunch of hills, and it's the top of a hill down here, and it's going to go down to the bottom, then up, and then down, and then back up. So a road that is in the background is going to start off pretty small. When it comes to the top of the middle ground hill, it's going to get bigger. And then when it gets to the top of the foreground hill, it's going to be the biggest it would be. And it's okay if it overlaps a little bit on your word foreground. So you've now gone through background, which is tiny in the background, middle ground, which is in the middle and it's about medium, and then foreground, which are the bigger ones. So, I wanted you to draw big because you're filling up the whole page. Don't draw so big that you can't fit everything on there. Your task today, draw the 3 lines. Write background, middle ground, foreground in the correct places on the lines. Draw a tree in the correct size next to the words. Draw the lines, which becomes the roads, that go from background down to the foreground. For a time extender, draw houses or cars or something else that you would find outside to show distance. Remember, if it's in the background near the back, it needs to be small. If it's in the front, it will be bigger. Keep track of your artwork because our next lesson is going to be reviewing and going back over all of these. If you have any questions, you can email me at afrans@amanaacademy.org. And I'll see you later, 3rd grade.